Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Torres. If this is the first time you tune in, you'll want to know that we are the top consumer goods and retail podcast in Europe. We are called the FMCG Guys, which can be misleading, but we do cover other verticals like consumer electronics, retail, and fashion, which will actually be our case today. You can check out our website, www.fmcgguys.com, to see what other leaders we've spoken with in the last 5 years. We have over 200 interviews, so a lot to choose from. And I've said it multiple times here on the podcast that there's never been a more exciting yet more challenging time to be a marketing leader as right now, because growth doesn't come for free. The consumer is harder to reach and probably understand than ever before. But on the other side, there are many more ways to innovate and delight consumers than ever. So very excited about my conversation today. We're going to speak with the CMO of Furla, who's Erika Ferszt. Hello, Erika. How are you?
Hi, nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
Nice to see you too. Where are you tuning in from today, Erika?
We are in very boiling hot Milan today.
Yes, I can imagine. I've only been there in winter, and it's very cold. And normally these continental places that are very cold in winter get very hot in the summer.
Yeah, we do not disappoint on the heat. So,
Excellent. So, can you tell me a bit about your role at Furla and a bit about Furla itself, just to get into situation?
Yeah, sure. So Furla is actually an historic Italian brand of leather goods. It was founded in 1927 by the Furlanetto family. Actually, the history of the brand is not well known, which is something I'm working on correcting. But it's a legacy and a heritage brand, and it's been very much focused on making sure that beautiful, well-designed, creative, high-quality leather goods were accessible to everyone. So we are not in the luxury space, I would say, we don't compete with the Louis Vuittons and those high prices. We really try and have a very respectful pricing with a very high quality, beautiful product, so that it can be accessible to everybody. It's like I said, it's been around since 1927. As with every centenary brand, it's had its ups and downs, and we're currently working on building its next chapter.
And when you talk about leather goods, what are like the star products?
We primarily do handbags, totes, the whole range. There's also some small leather goods. We also have a shoe line that is currently being developed and fleshed out. But that's sort of the core. That's one of the, it's an expertise of the brand because they've really stayed focused on their core products as opposed to trying to do everything from A to Z.
Mm-hmm. What does it mean to be a CMO at Furla right now?
Well, actually, it means it's kind of like a playground. And one of the things we've been saying, our signature for our new campaign coming up in spring, which is actually going to be a multi-year campaign, but it's "Come Play with Us." And so the idea is, we have these beautiful bags. We live in a very creative time where, thanks to artists' vision and also computer techniques, you can really do anything that you can imagine at a different price level. You can pay $100 or you can pay $100,000. But it's a very creative time to sort of think about, all right, well, what do we want to do and how do we do it? And so we have meetings every day. Someone will bring an idea in and be like, oh, that's fun, let's do it. And thanks to all the new technologies, but also I kind of want to say the gig economy. Once upon a time, advertising was very monolith agency. You would have to go through an entire process of briefing the agency, getting a creative brief back, going through that, and it could take months just to get one image done. And something I posted on LinkedIn not too long ago was nowadays I saw a picture that I loved on Instagram. We reversed searched it, found the photographer, and 3 weeks later, we had 10 absolutely gorgeous photos that he had taken for us. So it's a time when you can also move fast and respond to the market in real time, which is, of course, something great, but also a lot of pressure because things move fast and you have to be paying attention to see it and move with the times.
Well, I did say it before. There's never been a more exciting yet challenging point in time to be in marketing. Would you agree with that, by the way?
I absolutely do. I mean, so we say it's never been easier to reach a target, and it's never been harder to reach a target because you have so many tools where you can actually get to a very, very specific person, but now you're not competing with 4 other companies. You're competing with 100,000 companies from all over the world, right? You can see an ad from a tiny brand in Indonesia right after you see mine, so the competitive set has gotten gigantic. It's very democratic in terms of reaching your final target. And one of the issues that I struggle with is that there is a little bit of pay for play. Like the people who have more money are obviously more advantaged, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what wins, because even if they put millions of dollars behind a campaign that doesn't work, you can still have an outlier come from nowhere and it goes viral. And, so there's a little bit of planning, a little bit of science, and also a little bit of luck. So
as in all things in life. And Erika, clearly your accent is not from Milan. I know you grew up I think you mentioned the other day to me, you grew up in New York, right?
That's correct.
How did you start your career?
Well, I started my career in New York in advertising agencies. I worked in the new business department for an agency that is not in existence anymore. That's how old I am. It was literally last century. And it was a fantastic university for my first job because I was the staff assistant, but in the new business department, you had all the resources and you were working with the top minds in the agency. And it was really sort of an aggressive, condensed version of going through the campaigns, getting the best work, doing all the insights, and dealing with clients. So I spent a year and a half there in the office in New York and just learned so much. But I also I still have a Dutch passport, thanks to my father. And I was like, I would really like to live abroad. I'm very young. I don't have any children. I'm not married, so if I'm going to do it, now is the time. And it just so happened that the CEO of the agency at that time was very interested in the concept of interpollination of nationalities. And so I asked if I could move to Italy. I wanted to move to Florence, but the office was in Milan. Very different.
Yeah.
And so that kind of started things, then I fell in love with being in Italy and I went back to New York, but I kind of left my heart here. So I came back and I was still working in advertising. And then one of my former bosses had a client. She had opened her own agency who was looking for someone who understood communications. And so I jumped over to the client side. And as my former boss says, that's where the monster was created.
Because they had the two sides of it. And then on the client side, I think you were in a couple of companies, but then you spent 10 years at another monster called Luxottica, which is, for anyone that doesn't know, is the biggest glasses company in the world. They have Ray-Ban, Oakley, and a lot of other licenses as well. How were those 10 years? Because 10 years obviously is a big chunk of our life, isn't it?
It is. 10 years is a very long time. And when I was going in, I never imagined I would be there for 10 years. But it was such an incredible opportunity personally, professionally. I had amazing bosses. I had an amazing team. I had one of the absolute greatest brands on the entire planet that I was working with, which was Ray-Ban. And the beauty of it was that Ray-Ban being owned by an Italian company, but having an American soul. And here I was, this American in Italy. So I understood both of them and how to sort of bring these two cultures together into making something really powerful. And I think, we were working with a fantastic agency then at the time. And it was the dawn of social media. And it was really just such an incredibly creative time to be in business, because that they hadn't figured out the algorithms yet. So you got to be, you weren't trying to hack the system. You were just trying to do better work. And so every year we were just challenging ourselves on what else could we do? What would be a cool thing to do now? Ray-Ban has a history of now it'll be 85 years of being in the counterculture historically. It's shifted a little bit now, but we really wanted to honor that history and that DNA, and so it was just great. It was so much fun. I loved it. There was not a minute of that job that felt like work.
Yeah, it's more. It is like interesting because it is obviously a market leader, but it has that. And actually thinking more like when you were there, more like 10 years ago, it had that maverick type of feel to it as an answer to like the more like maybe mainstream Nike sunglasses or Oakley, which are more like mainstream or more. Yeah, it had some more personality to them maybe in some way.
We were really trying to embrace that because, like I said, it had always been at the edge of counterculture and moving the cultural conversation forward. And so there was, it was like the moment of indie music before EDM kind of took over. And so we had all sorts of cool bands coming out of Austin, Texas. It was like early days South by Southwest. It was early days Coachella. And now all of those properties have become gigantic and corporate and more mainstream. There isn't much of a counterculture right now in that traditional sense. So, but it was super fun to do.
Those were the days.
I personally, there's nothing I miss more than indie music. So
I'm a big fan of like rock and anything that's not too rhythmic and too electronic. So I can feel you. Another topic, actually, one day, one of my dreams on the podcast, I don't know if to call it dream, has been to like give it like a pop culture twist and talk more about pop culture with my guests. So maybe we can do a second part another day.
I live for pop culture. It's my second hobby.
Well, we'll definitely talk about that when we meet in Milan. We'll have a conversation about that, and we should talk about doing something related to the podcast with that. One thing that we talked about as well, and I really like about your profile, is that after Luxottica for 10 years, and now you're back in a corporate, but you had another nearly 10 years doing something very maybe unexpected for me as a recruiter by trade. I don't see many people that have done that. And you went freelance for 10 years. Tell me about that.
I did. Well, so a couple of things happened to me. It wasn't intentional. But I don't have like a career strategy per se. I sort of read what's going on and what's good for me and do that. I had such an amazing time doing that job that when I left the company, I knew I couldn't just go anywhere else, right? It's like having a wonderful marriage that ends and then you don't just like jump into dating whomever. So I personally felt the need to sort of decant from the experience anyway. It also happened that as I was leaving the company, I ended up in the hospital losing vision in my right eye, which the doctors ultimately concluded was from stress, or just from the way I was living. I was I said I loved working and I worked all the time. So that was also kind of, I was like, I think I need to take a little bit of time and take care of my health. And the irony is that after that happened, I had a meeting with the CEO, who's the CEO of Furla right now. He was the CEO back then, 10 years ago. And he asked me if I wanted to join the company. And I was like, listen, this thing just happened to me. I think I need to take some time out to look for my health. But thank you. And, best of luck. And we sort of parted ways. So it was funny that we would come back 10 years later. And I'll tell that story. But yeah, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I needed to stay in this field doing what I do because recruiters are like, well, a huge pivot. What are you doing? So I wanted to make sure that I was constantly updated and still had connections to that world. So I didn't abandon it completely. But I also had a whole list of things, professional things, personal things that I wanted to see if I could do. Could I run my own company? Would I even enjoy running my own company? I also really just wanted to be a mom. I had a daughter who was like 12 at the time, 11, 12. And I remember getting into a lot of trouble in my adolescent years because I didn't have eyes on me. We were the classic latchkey kid generation. So I really just kind of wanted to be around more, which ended up being the greatest gift I could ever give myself, looking backwards. But while I was doing that, I went back to school. I did a postgraduate degree in the neuroscience of mental health. I got a master's of science in behavioral psychology. I created my own app from scratch using scientific methods to help people moderate their emotional responses in real time. I sold it in to different people. I started doing a lot of speaking on workplace wellness and neuroscience of well-being. I did speeches at BNP Paribas, for PayPal, for Montclair. So, there was lots of interest. It was around COVID, so there was a lot of interest in that argument. But I did not like, as much as I thought I would, I did not like being my own boss, because I love the creative development part. I do not like the going out and chasing the business part. And that is fundamental. And I have to say, the whole experience made me have a ton more respect of the entire organization. I was like very focused on my piece. And after having to do it myself, it actually changed how I would show up as a manager in the future. Yeah, but that was it. And then my daughter, 10 years passed.
Just like that. But
just like that.
I think, Erika, you said you did all these, you went back to school and you were giving advice on workplace wellness. But on top of that, you were also like consulting on marketing, right? During this time.
Yeah. And I worked on lots of different things. I did a bunch of startups. I worked for Diesel. I worked for Loro Piana. I worked for Zegna. And others not coming to mind.
As much as you didn't like getting your own business, it didn't go so bad for you. If anyone's listening and they feel like they're in a type of place, maybe like you were, or that they have the curiosity for going on their own, what would your advice be? Because I think a lot of people are also, it can be cold out there. I think a lot of people are terrified of finding themselves alone.
Well, I was very lucky in that, thanks to the growth of Luxottica and my long-term incentives in stock, that I was able to create a very healthy sort of savings account and nest egg that gave me the peace of mind that if I went a year or 2 years without earning X, that I would still be fine. And so that's a huge part of it. If that had not happened, I would not have been able to do that. And so, I thank whomever needs to be thanked every day that I found myself in that position. It is challenging because I was not married, so I didn't have like a husband or a family to rely on. I had to kind of make sure I was doing it myself. But for people who can't do that financially, economically, what I always try and advise, both from like when I was doing personal coaching as well. I still mentor for female founders, and I was doing entrepreneur in residence for Harvard for a little while. But what I always recommend is that if you have a desire for something that you want to do with, like in your life or learn about, the worst thing you can do is ignore it, because it's going to create an absolute sense of dissatisfaction in the rest of your life. Now, it doesn't mean it has to become your entire life. You might want to like dip your toe in, because sometimes we think that we'll like doing something, and then when we're in it, we actually don't. I was sure that I was born to be my own boss, and I just needed to start my own company and I would be happy. And then at the end of the day, I was like, this sucks. So, I miss being around people. I miss being able to collaborate and work in a system. And I would never have thought that like I would actually go back to being in a company, and people thought I was crazy. And I was like, I miss the environment. I miss having, a shared goal. I'm tired of being at home by myself, having to constantly be coach, cheerleader, salesperson. It's incredibly exhausting. But if you're interested, I have a friend of mine who was like, I have to work, but I've always wanted to be an interior designer. And I was like, great. Carve out time for yourself on the evenings and the weekends. Take a class, study up on that. Find out, is there something interesting, or did you just want to learn more about it? So you have to sort of satisfy that need in some way. It doesn't have to take over your life. But if you ignore it, it's almost a guarantee that you're just going to have a growing dissatisfaction with what you're currently doing, because you're fantasizing about something else.
I think fantasizing is a great word. And I think, just tipping their toes on it somehow, because I think that's the truth. People get to the weekend and they don't want to know anything about work. But maybe it's worth taking some time out of your free time to see if like what you want to do full time is something that will suit you, no?
Yeah. Well, and I don't even see it as taking out. One of the things that we had worked on a project for Sky TV many years ago, and we were talking about people's time, and we did a lot of interviews about how people qualify time. And one of the expressions that we use most frequently is "I have to," or like "I don't have time." You make time. You don't have it. We all have exactly the same. It's 24 hours in a day. Now, you choose to do the things that you do. Do you have to go to that family dinner? No, you don't have to. You actually make a choice because you don't want to disrupt those bonds, because But simply shifting that language from have to choose to already changes how your brain sees it. So it stops becoming something that you're oppressed by and that you take power over. But even that, like taking time out to investigate, would I be interested in something else, is not work. It's feeding you and needs. So it's me time, because I'm saying, what will make me happy? Let me spend an hour taking this class to see if this will make me happy.
Totally. So speaking of that, what made you go back to a big company like Furla?
Well, as I said, I was really tired of doing my own thing, and it was going well too. So, everyone was a little bit surprised. I had started my own podcast. I had 2 podcasts going actually for a while there. But I was getting older, and my daughter was about to leave the house, and it's already like hard enough to get out of your pajamas when you work for yourself during the day, that I was like, if I don't have my daughter, I don't have fixed appointments, I can see myself like sitting on the couch watching TikTok for 12 hours and just wondering where my day went. So I wanted a little bit of structure back in my life, imposed structure. I wanted to communicate, but I also really just wanted a project because I love to turn things around, get things off the ground. I am not a maintenance manager. Like if you have a company that's doing well, I am not the right marketing person for you. If you want to start over, launch something, that's really when I give my best. So Furla was like, we want to do a new chapter. And I was like, all right, well, here I am. Me
And
too.
and you'd spoken with the CEO 10 years back.
Yes.
He re-became the CEO, and then you
Yeah.
had a conversation 10 years later, no?
Yeah, well, fate would have it. I was in London with my daughter right as she was starting. Actually, we were in Barcelona right before she was starting university. And I happened to see in Business of Fashion the announcement that he was rejoining the company the same time that I had kind of made the decision to go back to work. And I was like, maybe this is a little bit of kismet happening here. So.
That's great. That's great. And so we're talking about, 10 years as a freelancer, 10 years at Luxottica prior. How have you seen marketing change through the years?
Oh, it's drastic. It is a shell of its former self. And we can see this in the size of ad agencies. You know, there used to be 7, 8 monoliths, these giant ad agencies that had thousands of employees. And now they're all compressing. Like one of the biggest ad agencies historically in New York now has a floor of its original building. Other agencies have collapsed all 4 of their groups into one big one. So the agency network or the agency concept has totally shifted. We actually don't even use an ad agency. We don't have an agency. We work with separate creative directors based on the project. And that's one of the things, it's for better and for worse, that's changed is that the whole concept of like one campaign for the whole year is really tough because you have to keep things fresh. People's attention span is scientifically reported as less than that of a goldfish right now. This is not a good thing, but it is what it is what it is. And so you have to be constantly churning out newness all the time if you want to stay relevant. I know the second that our Instagram gets a little bit predictable, we see numbers dip almost immediately. So it's really changed. And I think once upon a time, the brands and the agencies had the power, right? There were 10 companies. We were throwing lots of money. You had a choice of like these 3 things. I was actually just telling, I have a very young team here. And I was telling them the other day that like when I was young, the milk aisle had whole milk, skim milk, big, small, and that was it, right? And one of the first times that I went back to the United States and there was an entire wall of milks, I was like, okay, this is emblematic of how things are shifting. There is so much choice. Everything is hyper personalized anymore that one message is no longer going to be good for 18 to 35, 35 to 54. You know, everything has to be really considered and focused on your very specific niche. You have to be fast. On the flip side, you don't have to be so expensive anymore. We used to spend millions of dollars on advertising campaigns, and that would be insane today. That whole system, this giant system, doesn't work and doesn't exist anymore. You kind of have to be like a little bit scrappy and ready to respond quickly and very creative.
Very creative a lot of times as well.
Very creative all the time. Yes, it's exhausting, but it's fun if you like it.
And do you think that's like result partly of like the emergence of like performance marketing?
So do I believe in data? Like because I see performance marketing as something a little bit different, right? And that's sort of churning the numbers. And I think we had a moment where it was all about that. I don't think that works anymore because just like I said, people get tired of things. So the whole like pay for play, it's like you could have won 4 years ago if you spent more, regardless of what your creative was. Today, that is not the case because as culture and consumers are bombarded with entertainment, thanks to TikTok, and are expecting everything to entertain them or they go.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you paid a lot. If it's not interesting, I'm scrolling. So I do super strongly believe in data, and I think it needs to be an important piece of your reasoning. I am not as focused on performance marketing as we were a few years ago. Now I look for what story is this data telling us, and how do we want to respond?
Yeah. As part of like your more tactical efforts, but maybe not necessarily your more like long-term strategic ones.
Well, again, it's hard to make long-term strategies. We made an annual plan, and as I have a 5-year vision that we've written, and then there was a 1-year plan that's already been retouched 3 times. So, because hey, guess what? Now you have tariffs that came out of nowhere that we didn't expect. Okay, well then we have to reshuffle those cards. Oh no, wait, the tariffs aren't actually going to as bad as we thought. Okay, China's doing well. No, China's not doing well anymore. So like these things, the fact that we're all so interconnected, the butterfly flaps its wings over there and I have to change my social media plan. So it's kind of like that. You have to be reactive. That's why I try and keep an overriding arch of strategy. Like everything we do needs to ladder up to this, the whole come play with us idea. What that looks like on a day-to-day basis can shift.
And what about, we haven't mentioned this word yet, this acronym AI. As a marketer, what's the impact been so far? And what do you think it's going to be?
Well, okay. So I have mixed feelings about AI. There are days when I love it and there are days when I hate it. There are days when I'm like, oh, wow, that's incredible. And then I try and give it a prompt and I'm like, well, actually, that's a huge letdown. um, I so I personally believe that there is absolutely no substitute for human creativity. I wrote a paper on the risks of AI and what that means, because part of human intelligence and human innovation and human creativity is wrestling with a problem. And if I delegate all of my thinking to ChatGPT, I don't wrestle with anything, which literally makes me a less intelligent human being. Like I have less synaptic connections that I form from struggle, because it also means I can't reason by myself. So I think that there is long-term potential downsides that people are not paying attention to. AI is also a closed system. Like if you're trying to innovate or trying to do something new, by definition, it cannot do that because it can only fish from within its existing body of knowledge. So if you're trying to get it to break through to like, give me an idea that's never been done, it can't do that.
Yeah.
Has to be us. So do I use I use ChatGPT to brainstorm a lot. Because I'm like, all right, give me a better way of saying this. And then it'll trigger something in my head, be like, oh, okay, that's what I wanted to say. I don't, and I use it to be polite. Sometimes I can be direct, so I like to run my email communication.
Well, you can get Erika out of New York. You can't get the New York out of Erika, can you?
Correct. So I like to just make sure that I'm not offending anyone with that, and it helps. It's not going away, so ignoring it is not not beneficial. But I also think we're seeing some companies that are like, all right, let's do everything AI. And there is a very visceral reaction that happens in the end consumer when they sense that, like, people get very defensive about humanity when they see it being taken away from them. There was an article, I can't remember which one, it was one of the fashion trades that was celebrating all of these AI executions that were done from some of the top fashion companies. And the comments did not go the way they thought that post was going to go. And it was like, yeah, all built off the back of former creatives, So we don't use it a lot. Occasionally we will, like if I'm missing a bag in a color or something, we'll have it work with that. Or we're very explicit about when we're using it. But I would say the amount of AI that we use is like 2% compared to the rest of it.
Interesting. Because you have an interesting use case here where you have to, you have all this legacy that you want to really embed and make explicit in your brand offering, but you're still in this new world, in this current world where you have to also be very quick and detecting trends and being reactive. How, as a marketer, I'm interested to know, how do you approach that like from a ideological or intellectual challenge type of approach?
Well, the truth is that human dynamics. So I have spent so much of my time studying psychology and behavioral psychology because I am obsessed with patterns. The entire universe is built on patterns. And once you can identify it, you are able to predict what happens next. And if something doesn't happen the way it's supposed to, then you're looking at a change, right? And so we go into that and we say, okay, why did this happen? What's driving this change? Why did the pattern break? And so that's kind of how I operate. We look at the trend research and we say, okay, well, why is this coming up now? Or what is this based on? Where is this going? But at the end of the day, human emotions are stimulated by the same things. Getting people to feel good, feel bad, feel happy, feel sad, or make something pretty all comes down to the same things. So it's just using the tools. The tools change, but the dynamics don't. So once you've perfected the dynamics, because I think a lot of people can get lost in the tools and forget about the dynamics. We focus on the dynamics and say which one of the tool set is the best one to come in.
Speaking of tools, by the way, you mentioned before you work with big agencies, big campaigns, and really the media was what magazine, and we talk about fashion, magazines, TV, not even radio that much, I think.
We had 3 lines. There was above the line, below the line, and outdoor.
Okay. And now?
Well, now you have 16 different platforms because you've got Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook. And you can't not be on one. You can be like, oh, okay, things have shifted here. Let's get rid of that, because they're all starting to function in different things. So it's very fragmented and it's very difficult. Hopefully the platforms will stop so we can catch our breath for a second. But like I said, you adapt or die. It's literal Darwinism.
So with everything in mind, what is your vision for Furla for the next? Yeah, you mentioned the 5-year strategy. So let's say 5 years. Nobody dares to make predictions for 5 years anymore. So excited to hear what you have to say.
Well, I mean, obviously I can't share too much. But like I said, with Ray-Ban, my job was to find out who its essence was and then just constantly I don't want to say reinvent, but re-articulate its ethos in whatever was happening in culture at that time. And here it's the exact same thing. There is a DNA to Furla that we've articulated in a more concrete way. And now it's just having the entire organization really focus on delivering on that initial promise which is actually very simple. Things don't have to be very complicated. The Occam's razor, keep things as simple as possible, which is not the thing, but whatever. It's really just about who are we and how does that connect and resonate with the people we want it to in today's world. And that's really, which is the right product for that? What's the right media for that? Who are the right people to be saying that? We are not necessarily a brand that needs or even wants to chase the A-listers. We would never aggressively try and be in Kim Kardashian's pool of brands because it's a different environment. It's a different, and I feel like there's a lot of brands that kind of go after like a cookie cutter strategy, which is get these people, get in that location, be at that party, which is a strategy. And for the most part, it can be successful if you have lots of money. If you don't have that kind of money, you have to do things differently.
You have to be smart, basically.
I didn't want to say it.
I'll say it as an external. And by the way, I wanted to ask you on your LinkedIn profile, you have as the headline that you've written a book around Taylor Swift. So tell me more about that.
I think Taylor Swift is the absolute greatest marketer on the planet today. And the book grew out of people asking me to come and speak about it. Because I did a whole podcast series called Swiftonomics, where I talked about the 12 different strategies that she uses to connect in today's environment. And most people say, oh, well, she's a singer. It's totally different. But she's a brand. And she thinks about herself in that way very much as well. Like if you've seen any of the America's Sweetheart or Miss Americana and her other books and stuff, she thinks about herself very much as a brand and what she's doing. And how she's been able to connect and survive, thrive, and reinvent herself successfully, consistently, is, as a professional, like I'll watch her and be speechless. So I felt, and so as a woman, I saw a lot of people coming after her all the time, like, oh, she's just a dumb blonde, right? Like her songs are so boring, so stupid. And I was like, this woman is a genius. And if you're missing it. So I said, I felt like there was a travesty happening. And I was like, I'm actually going to articulate from a marketer's point of view why this woman is the absolute best in the business.
Very interesting. So I'll obviously leave your profile on the show notes. I think very worth having a look at your trajectory and more about this as well. Erika, this wouldn't be another FMCG Guys episode. I mean, it's not another one. It's a unique episode, as they all are. But there's this famous last question we ask all our guests, which is, if you went back to yourself when you were starting your career with everything that you've learned and you had to give yourself one piece of advice, what would that be?
Okay, so I love this question, and I know I'm supposed to give something inspirational, but I'm actually going to give some very basic advice, which I would give to myself and I would give to any young woman in business today, and that is to network more, make relationships, get out there, talk to people, connect. I was very focused on the doing the job excellently, being excellent, being better, over achieving. And if I had to go back and do it again, the one thing I would add is to focus more on relationships.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I can't agree more. As someone also that built my career on building relationships, but for me it was a KPI, right? As a headhunter, but I think that a lot of people sometimes and I think it's, you would know more than me, but I think it affects more women than men.
Yeah. I was about to say that. I don't want to descend into gender politics, but I think men are far more comfortable with that aspect of it. I think they're more comfortable sharing, walking into a room with confidence and being able to walk up to whomever. And I think that some women really struggle with that. And so that's why that's my first thing is like, just go in, walk up. I still do. I hate going to networking events because I hate walking up to people I don't know and just starting a random conversation. Part of it is that I hate small talk. So most people don't want to immediately get into the throes of like, what do you think of the dynamics between? So that's my issue. But yeah, if I had to go back and learn a skill from the start and would encourage any young woman, it's learn how to network.
Perfect. So I'll try to summarize quickly the conversation we've had. I really like the idea of come play with us for Furla. So I'm very excited to see what you guys deliver next. I'll be watching. I think it's just been a great conversation about how marketing's changed, and all the opportunity, all the challenges, going from big agencies, big campaigns to, as you said, you have different creative directors that you're working with. So you have to be, I think there's not been a better place to be smart and play smart. But of course, you have to take a lot of decisions as well, no? You literally said that marketing is a shell of its former self, which is telling a lot. And I think that marketers need to, in the same way that you said, be open to networking. I think that's a great way to see what other people are doing, but also open to learning, maybe re-educating themselves, probably a necessary one. We talked about data and AI being interesting tools, especially data, but that again, you have to know how to, maybe, as you said, see that pattern and reading society, having that part of emotional intelligence. And you kind of hinted to it, but I know that's something that you're very big on, like reading people, the psychology, and really then building the brand, the strategy, the long-term strategy, and being more tactical, but always keeping in mind, what's the northern star for my brand, and where's my consumer at, and where's my consumer going to be, which is maybe the more difficult part.
Yeah, certainly.
So thanks, Erika. Hope I summarized this well enough. That's what we always do at the end of every episode, by the way.
Yeah, sounds good.
Fantastic. So Erika, thanks so much for joining me. I had a lot of fun, I have to say. And I'm sure I'll see you around in Europe. And so thanks.
Thank you.
And thanks to our audience as well. And we'll see you in the next episode of the FMCG Guys every Saturday and every Wednesday morning. Have a great day. Bye.